Colin, you shot this, right?
No, I think Muro did.
Oh, that's
That I
right.
did. I'll take that one.
Right.
Open that cabinet.
I think
I remember
Muro
seeing the
did
mock-up of this model in the office, like way back.
Yeah.
This thing was sitting in the office.
Our cardboard, our little foam core cut out. It
Yeah,
was a very complex build. Oh, here we
I
go.
can imagine.
Yeah, lots of great images.
I'm curious what like in terms of this trailer, how they chose the order of how they appear. Was it the order in which they were shot? Just Colin's there.
Yeah.
Me there. So those two are out of order. Those two are backwards from how we shot
Right.
them.
Oh, that's fab.
And
Look
then
at
this
that.
was the last one.
Look at those light fixtures in the morgue. It's all about that light fixture.
Great.
What is happening to me?
I don't know. It's one of my personal favorites.
It's your basement simulation.
My basement.
It's actually cool to see because I hadn't seen much of the other ones, so this is kind of my first time really seeing a lot of the other episodes.
Right.
They come.
They're all so different.
They're all so different, you guys.
Your coffin. I'll see you buried in it.
Like such different, just everything. The look, the personalities, the stories, the eras.
Yeah.
Welcome to my cabinet of curiosities.
There he is, the man
Have
himself.
that damn cabinet.
Where is that cabinet now? Where'd it go?
I think it's still here. I know Guillermo wants one for his bleak house. We made it, everything is practical, right? So he can put all his little creepy knickknacks in there.
Cool.
Make a great Christmas tree.
Yeah, exactly.
Put the gifts around it.
Yeah.
You know, doing other projects over the years, I mean, I think you tend to sometimes gravitate towards certain types of projects, and you know, things that like this, things that are scary, things that are sort of fantastical are fantastic places for visuals. You know, there are so many great opportunities to do all sorts of crazy different things, and you know, I'm really grateful that I get a chance to play in this sandbox every once in a while, because you know there are so many fantastic opportunities, you know, creatively. It's a fantastic thing.
You know, Guillermo was involved very much so in the creature design for us and in the set design early on, and but he wasn't really there, so it was a little bit just us kind of going with the vibe of what we understand, what I understand certainly, as a designer who's worked with him, you know, what his vision is, what the Del Toro look is. And you know, I had just come off of Nightmare Alley, which I'd done with him, onto this, so it was although Nightmare Alley was a very different film and a very different set of circumstances, and very, like, visually very different. You know, I've done a bit of Star Trek and a bit of this and that, which I've worked with Colin on Star Trek. I got my fill of sci-fi on that for a lifetime. So
I mean, ours were all sort of turn of the century, and almost in a weird way, we're all part of the same universe in a funny way. You know, there was a Lovecraftian kind of gothic kind of vibe going through all of them, and you know, each one have certain similarities, and each one, there's a rat somewhere in each of these
That's true.
stories.
That's true.
That links them together.
You being the common thread through all of it, you know, there's different DPs and directors, but you are the one production designer through the whole thing. And you've obviously got that connection with Guillermo as far as knowing the kind of the style and the look. And I remember with our first episode, there was that one in the beginning, you were showing us drawings of the arch of the corridors in the storage facility, and one of the drawings got revised, and you added archways, and you're like, oh, Guillermo really loves archways. And you added archways. So it's interesting how you were sort of, I guess, having that connection with him and peppering stuff through as you were designing, with him not really being there, but you knowing that. So I'd be interested to hear sort of your process with that.
yeah, I mean, I will always send him everything, and he, you know, sometimes he responds really strongly on certain parts of the design work, and other parts he'll just leave to me. Like there was one that you guys weren't involved with, which was the viewing, which I sort of designed with Panos, the director. But he was Guillermo, for example, on lot 36 with the arches and the whole designing of that storage facility. He was very involved in that. Okay, so here's lot 36 that we did together, Jeremy. And interestingly, this set for the old, what I call the old man, again, we repurposed that for the graveyard rats for the tenement building that Mason's in the end. So we found this actual storage facility that we went to, and then we built this. I think a lot of this got cut, actually, Eddie's office. But here's
There's a bit of it. There's a little bit of it, yeah.
Yeah. So here's the famous endless storage unit, which was a huge set. It took an entire studio set. About how we didn't put ceilings in, we just put mesh in. I know you wanted to address that.
That was interesting because I remember in the beginning, like Guillermo Navarro was very specific about how the fluorescent lights wanted to be, and we actually did tests very early on of like what the fluorescents would look like, how low they should hang, how much shadow they would throw on the wall, and how much the flaps would come down on the sides. And I think they were existing fixtures that your team had that were vintage fluorescent fixtures that we put our own Titan tubes in, but then I think we modified them with more metal on the sides to make the sides actually come down lower, so the shadows on the walls would be lower. And Guillermo Navarro was very
right.
He came in and looked at it and was like, "Oh, we need more shadow, like make the walls darker." So we really worked to like, how low can we hang these lights before they start to look ridiculous?
Yeah, and we custom built those housings to look like old housings, I remember. And
That's right.
We just kept going lower and lower. And then the mesh and the ceiling, we ended up just leaving open mesh, and because it was a dark studio, and the idea of these storage units is and I had seen this in real life actually on the Strain, which I shot with Colin because we shot in a real one. They just have these open floors above. So we were able to leave that open, and you masterfully put some light up there, and we put a bunch of dust bunnies and weird shit on top of the mesh to make it look, to break it up and make it look real.
Yeah, so I thought that was a cool touch, the dust application on the grating, because as soon as you put light through it, you could see it. If the light wasn't there, you couldn't see them, but if the light hit it at the right way, you'd see, like you can see in that frame in the lower left, the dirt that's caught in it. And it was great because we couldn't see the studio. We just had to put light cleverly off to one side that looks like some kind of, task lighting on another floor, and it just looked like you were in a real place.
It's interesting that the top image is actually our illustration. The bottom image is the actual film still. And this is one of the little locker rooms that we went into. Again, we did
same idea with the ceiling.
Mesh, a little bit of different lighting. And then we built this crazy padded room with I don't want to give it away. I don't know if we should look at this. Although I saw this in their release. And it's in the trailer, the creepy
That's
figure.
True. You and I and Shane worked with Guillermo Navarro to kind of figure out how to place those like gooseneck sconce lights on the walls, because there was the discussion of like, how much do we see the walls? How much do we not see it? How dirty is the fabric? And, that was a discussion, which is part of the process that I find interesting working, with you and the director of like doing a little bit of, because we did a little bit of testing with this, of actually figuring out how much light should hit those walls. Would the lights be on in that room, the logic behind it, and all that, and how much debris is on the floor, all that stuff was a fun discussion process.
This is one of the period ones that Colin and I worked on.
And this is a situation where, just talking about how locations play a role in things. Tamara and I had filmed in another room. This was at University of Toronto, and we had filmed in another room before, which was absolutely fantastic and would have been perfect. But at the time, they had torn up the road all around, and were doing construction all around the outside of that location. And so that sort of forced us to sort of reevaluate where we might want to film it, and we ended up finding this other space. I think it turned out really well, but it was really an interesting situation where you had this optimal situation, but external forces force your hand, and you have to make changes fairly late in the game, all things considered, I think.
Yeah, and it was very much Colin's decision to light from, there were windows on both sides of the room. The illustration on the top right is one of the other rooms we were considering, and then the other two are sort of film stills. But it was interesting because once we decided where Colin was actually able to light from, really, because there were two sides. I guess you could have lit from either, but there was that one primary side, and then we were able to sort of focus all our dressing and detail towards those windows. The
concept art's incredibly important, and it spoils you, because you especially with Tamara's team, because the concept art is almost photorealistic. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous, and it gives you this fantastic stepping off point where Tamara and myself, and in this situation Keith Thomas, the director, could really sort of talk about, oh, we love how this happens. How are we going to be able to show off certain elements in a given scene? What do we need to accent? And it really gives you a really quick shorthand, into any given sort of visual situation. And sometimes it's so right on the money that we just sort of go in that sort of direction. Other times, we have something else in mind in terms of how the light would work in the room or what have you, or we need to do day and night in a certain place. Having done a lot of shows with Tamara where we have this kind of concept art, and then to go into other situations where you don't, it's fascinating how helpful this kind of concept art is.
One of the things we did in this particular set is that addition of the single hanging bulb. Remember, Colin, that was so much conversation. So the concept on the left, and then the final image on the right with this single bulb, just was like, it was like the cherry on top of the sundae, kind of lighting that area. And we added curtains.
Yeah.
It's interesting how
it helped us reveal.
So,
it helped us, This sort of helped us learn about how do we reveal this one particular element in the story, and that led to the discussion about this using this bulb and this curtain reveal to discover this element of the story that ends up being quite important.
To have had you both in early on was essential for my design work, because it was like, what are we doing? How are we lighting this big arched window that I wanted to put in? And this is really a rehash of that set that we had earlier. So it was really about that arched window and how we were going to light the space. Colin, you did an amazing job. There was a lot of going back and forth with Shane View, our decorator, and what practicals, because there was so much lit by the practicals in all of these episodes.
And Shane found this fantastic, very sort of orange bulb that gave off this great quality of light, which we really leaned into for a lot of that stuff. And also these episodes were kind of on the border of electric light, and we had to keep reminding ourselves that no, they were, despite its time frame, we're past candles. You can actually flip a light on in a room, that did exist in that time frame. Sometimes maybe it's spookier to not, but we would sort of play with that.
And also playing a lot with curtains in all the sets that we did with you guys. That was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Of course, there's no curtains in the illustrations, but it was a lot of that. Yeah, this one was, Pickman's model was so much, we went for candles, we went for those augmented lights, and then we had this whole set that we burned. It's all coming back.
I think it's interesting too, Colin, what you said about the practical thing, and that Shane was great with finding, we could have a conversation and say, I'm looking for something like this, and he would come back with a bunch of options and how the plan of how to light something might change because of some really cool thing that Shane found, and then suddenly that's like the inspiration of, oh, that's the main thing now. So the set, we're going to light it more like this because Shane has found this great fixture. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, everything plays off of everything else as well. And in Pickman's model, we also had a lot of handheld lanterns, and Charles McGlynn, the props master, was really helpful with us. We ended up building these little handheld lanterns that were to look as though they were candles or oil lanterns, but were actually LEDs, all surrounded with a controller and a battery in each one. So each one was controllable, could flicker, and we could change its brightness on cue. And so that was a really important part of all of my episodes, working with Charles to design and build that stuff.
This one, we built the bottom of the house and then had green screen above it. Big VFX moment. I think there was one instance where I felt a little pinched, but mostly they're pretty open, good studios. And the advantage being for us, of course, we had all 4 stages.
We had 4, yeah.
Right next to each other, still getting my 10,000 steps just walking back and forth, as I'm sure you guys did every day. But at least we were all together. I don't think I could have actually done this show if we were in 2 different areas. We'd have to have 2 different art directors and art departments. But just being the convenience, and then being able to reuse the sets as the shows. And we didn't reuse all of them, like the storage ones. There was nothing reusable in that. It was just purpose built for that episode. And same with this one, the witch house that we actually had to rebuild.
I guess a choice was made to do, yeah, it was a bit of a rewrite in terms of how the show would end. And so we ended up having to change, sort of reshoot, restage some of the scenes, and I believe there were some other additions as well to the ending.
Thankfully, one of our carpenters kept all the beams, because it was an actual post and beam structure, and we were able to get them all back. I mean, we just built a bunch of trees and put a bunch of dirt there. That was a hard one to light, and the trees only went so far. And
yeah, so we had, I guess, how big was it? It was about 50 by 70, I think, was the
yeah,
floor space.
yeah,
and then about
it
10
was,
feet off of that in all directions, we had a backdrop that I guess would have been about 25 feet or so.
I think it was about 25. I think that was the max, whatever the max.
Right. And so, yeah, it was tricky. And also in the episode, we see it in two different states. So we find it as a kind of a welcoming place initially. And then as things kind of go south in the story, it becomes a much darker, moodier, less welcoming spot. And so we ended up, building a large sort of sky source over the top using, I think it was, forget the count of sky panels, almost 100. And then we use sky panels as well around the backdrop above and below, which would allow us to sort of change the mood of the thing. And then we just tried to be as careful as we could with focal lengths and focus to try and not give away that backdrop too much. Considering how much work we had to do in there, it was pretty efficient. We found a way to sort of change our angles and move around in there pretty quickly. And trees would move. You guys would shift things around on our lunch hours, to change things out.
Well, Catherine would be in there in her lunch hours too, just
right.
Very hands-on. I actually really would like to see this one more than anything, because I'm curious, and you've probably seen what VFX did to it, because I know the director wanted to make the trees move, and I don't know if that ever got put into the final mix. And any embellishments they did on the backing, like I assume that they would have done something to the backing. I mean, this would have been an ideal one to shoot on an AR stage if we'd had the time and the space to do it. Like, we didn't have an AR. We had the digital backing. We could have just put it on an AR wall. I know it takes more than just that, but next time.
It definitely was challenging, and it is augmented in VFX in the final thing. It's not, we don't have moving trees, but there's definitely something very interesting with pollen in the air, which changes its state as the forest does. So
the location work on this show was equally as challenging as the studio set, in a way more challenging. Going into an actual church and painting it, and we built this basically a altar facade in the church, and holy crow,
we ended up having to re-engineer part of the floor. We ended up having an engineer come in to figure out how big a techno crane we could actually fit in there to sort of get all the shots that we needed in the time we had. And we ended up building an extra structure in there to support the weight of the crane.
Then there's this one that Jeremy, we had so much fun on. Oh my god. This was the location we shot all the way in Ajax to find the most mundane house. Like, really, it was tough to find this particular house. It was a very oddball house. And then we built the interior on stage, and we just went totally, even though this wasn't strictly speaking a period piece, we went for a complete kind of 70s look. We shot a backing of the actual back of the street, but the night version,
the beginning, if you go back to the exterior shot, what was amazing is, so that little stoop there with the weird metal upright posts and stuff, I mean, your team captured like every little detail of the actual house's like messed up, falling apart, like detail. Like the metal was bent a certain way, and there was certain rust stains, and like the way the little no junk mail piece of tape stuck to the door, like all that stuff. You guys captured that like down to the T. So we had shots that we did of our hero who Kate played on the stoop on location, and then we also shot shots that were from a different scene on the set in the studio, and you can't tell them apart. Like the detail of the both are, even the way the concrete stairs were broken and stuff, like it was very exact. And then Colin, the art director, and I remember we worked together to do those backings, and Colin's quite good at that. That process. So the way you had it photographed, we sort of figured out the view out the windows, and then in his previs software, we sort of figured out the scale and the height and how far away it should look, and then what interstitial pieces we could fit in the studio. Like there was a bit of a tree and some grass that we were able to fit between the front window, because that window is so huge, and Lily was really adamant that we would see as much as possible at those windows, both in day and night. So we basically had to make one drop that would work for both. So we had to figure out how do we light this both ways, and how do we treat the file in Photoshop so that it can work as day and night. And I think Colin did great with that, because it worked well in both times of day.
I just remember the night one. We put those little tiny Christmas lights. That's what, to me, that's what really sold it. It was like, which was your brainchild, I believe. Putting these
someone went to the
tiny...
like dollars. Yeah, someone went to the dollar store and found like these miniature, teeny little LED like Christmas tree stringer lights. They were like the size of a grain of rice, and we just stuck them to the translite, and it looked like nighttime on the neighbors' houses across the street.
This was so much fun doing this set, because the colors were just lurid. Like they're nothing you'd ever you'd want to do in your own house, and the total 70s vibe. And, I was looking at a lot of, I was looking at Raising Arizona. I think that whole Coen brothers vibe with, they had carpet up the walls when we did this hallway. And then we took cues from the actual house, the way the house was laid out as a sort of split level. But did these crazy, like the bedroom, we did this crazy slanted ceiling, and did a wild section above the bed, right, Jeremy? Like we had to
that's right.
shot down on them that our director really wanted, Anna Lily. So it was a complicated set, and there's so many shots into this mirror that was all what do you call it, one-way glass, so we could shoot through the mirror. That
was a huge bonus, because it allowed us to have two cameras in there. We could have a camera in the bathroom and one behind the mirror all the time, so we could always be shooting the interior of the bathroom and behind the mirror simultaneously, because neither camera could see each other. And I thought it was great, all the custom printing, like the wallpaper and some of the carpet, like you had that custom printed. So all that wallpaper is custom. Yeah.
The tile, all the tile.
And the tile, right.
It's really hard to find period tile in that quantity or that look that we were going for. So we went. And then we built my basement. Really looks like my basement, except I don't have a purple monster in it.
The detail in the basement was quite good, like just all the way the pipes were running in the joists, and it looks like the basements we've all been in. It's pretty amazing.
Colin and I have shot in a couple of basement sets. I mean, what's really nice is, you guys get these low angles, so you do all this ceiling, and you really, in the basement, you can really bring it down. And that's one thing I think Guillermo loves to do. He's like, always bring the ceilings down so we can see the ceilings.
I remember we did have a lot of discussion on the main floor of the house, the ceilings, as what the ceiling, there were those beams that Lily was kind of trying to figure out what the right beam should be and how to paint them and not. I mean, there was a lot of that discussion of how low and how much the ceiling in the living room and the beams would be. And I think we modified it a couple times, and then we ended up at that happy place where it was.
And then we had this crazy commercial.
The infomercial set. That was fun.
Oh, and a bank. We were so lucky with this bank location, like that we found a bank that was actually empty, and we could put our own custom built counters and all of that. The interesting thing about this is the wide angle shooting. Oh my God. Like
Lily was really adamant she wanted everything on like a 14. Her favorite lens was the Cook 15 to 40 zoom, and we shot almost everything that way. So thinking of, talking to the riggers and everyone saying, remember everyone, we're seeing this on a 14 mil. Like we can't hide the way we usually can. Like think of it that we're going to see the entire room and most of the ceiling all the time. So for all of us, we had to kind of constantly remind ourselves that you can't get away with things here. Like you're going to see everything. You pan the camera like a little bit to the right, and now you see the other half of the room. Even in the set, even in the house, because we had to think of all the windows might be seen at any given time. Like in the kitchen and living room, you might see all the windows in one shot. So every window has to look real and right at the same time.
Yeah, and the ceilings were low too, so we really embraced that. I mean, these were all wild panels this is the illustration, but we made all those wild. But I don't think you wilded much, right?
We never did. So we just leaned on the practicals and what Shane and you were able to provide us, and they really motivated everything.
Yeah, we got some good practicals in that one. The black and white,
which will be seen in color.
No way. Colin. They didn't
It's,
go for it, eh?
in the end, it was decided that a color version would be best. And so Vincenzo and Mark Cooper, our colorist, and myself have kind of found a desaturated look using color in a hopefully an interesting way to give us some of the same graphic vibe.
Can't
And in
wait.
fact, the stills that we got from Netflix are all with that color correction.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, you should share those because we put, I had all the renders and stuff in color, and then we went black and white, and I never did them in color like this. There's the still and there's the render at the bottom, and we just did everything in black and white.
Yeah, well, all the costumes were designed that way, and the lighting and the colors we were using would be contrary to what you would do in color, because we were thinking about using color to be able to separate things tonally and having control over different elements in post. And so we sort of done a little bit of we've used that in a different sort of way now. Vincenzo storyboarded the entire episode. And when you look at the storyboards, I forget if it's 90 pages or something like that, it looks like a graphic novel.
Yeah.
And so we had that as our guide, and we put that up every day. What the sequence we would be working on that day, we put up on the wall, and we'd still be struck by something cool along the way. And well, why don't we try this instead of that? But it was a great sort of starting position for sure to have.
We painted it in black and white. Once we actually did. I mean, it was so dark you couldn't tell, but once the decision to go black and white was made, we used black and white painting for the bulk of it, and for some of the tunnels. Not really. The tunnels we had natural colors, but literally painted in gray tones. So I hope it turns out okay.
The original discussions about how on earth we would make this tunnel work and how he would travel around, and how would the camera sort of roll around with him. We were sort of picking our brains about that for months and months.
We had built that a whole section, Colin, with where the guys set up the camera on the track. It was a design camera, complete like interwoven process. Like we couldn't build anything until we figured out how the camera was going to move through. Exactly. We did these sections, and then we added, and we figured out how to build a bloody rat tunnel, like
just big enough that we could fit a mini Libra remote head through it, or without catching on the corners. And so we built this thing called the rat coaster, which was basically a giant I-beam that would sort of follow a certain track with certain angles of curves and things. We designed it so that it would fit through as small a gap as possible in the ceiling. So it literally was like a piece of metal like this that would go from the trucks on the I-beam above through this little slit down to the remote head down below. We could go all the way around this thing as many times as we needed to. We can do that. The poor old actor going on his hands and knees, it's not as easy as it looks. Part of our initial discussion about desaturation and about black and white was about, okay, how do we make this look, not lit? And it's too bad. Wouldn't it be cool if it was black and white? Because then we could just make shadows and high contrast, and it just wouldn't look like movie lights. It would just look like a graphic image. And that, I think, is part of how the idea of being desaturated or black and white for this episode started to come along. The flashlight, if he has a flashlight, because he's going to be in absolute darkness down there, he would have brought a flashlight with him as he was robbing graves, and then that would continue on. Did they have flashlights at this time? Yes, they did, actually. And so we started looking at what a flashlight looked like at the turn of the century. It's fine to have a flashlight that blasts forward. What lights the guy's face? And so what we came up with was these little sort of heat outlets on the top of the thing that would kick light back. And so I think you can see on the top there, we invented these little fins.
Vents. I thought of them as vents.
Vents. And then that would sort of allow us another light source to shine back on his face. So everywhere he goes, he's not only lighting the scene, but he's lighting himself as well. I think we ended up building all sorts of different versions. We built stunt versions to hit him on the head with, to drop. And these, again, all had an LED. They had different control. We couldn't control all of it remotely. We can control part of it remotely. And then the other part we'd have to open up and play with the switches. We had color control and output control. It was really great.
Yeah.
It worked a charm.
You know, the fact that he's got to put it down, so we had to build it, like just the design parameters. It had to work for you for lighting. He had to put it down. He had to be able to light him, you know, throw it. He falls with it. It gets banged up.
There was one scene where he puts the thing down to kind of light what he's doing and then gets involved in a whole motion control action sequence. So we did have it set up so that we could actually attach arms to it and lock it into position so it wouldn't change from pass to pass to pass on the motion control.
You know, our offices weren't there, but they were pretty close. They were a 2-minute bike ride or a 1-minute car drive or a 10-minute walk. And so, you know, we were able to go back and forth a lot. The decisions to build what we build were really carefully thought out in terms of sets. You know, like storage facility, you would think, oh, you can just go into a storage facility. Building it as a set was like, there's no way we would have been able to shoot that particular one going on location.
We had to see the travel of the corridors and round corners, and there's that whole thing of the lights turning on and off. That was like the whole kind of subplot, was the timers of the lights keep shutting off, and he has to keep turning the lights back on. We never would have been able to have that easy level of control in a place that we didn't own.
And then reusing sets and just you know, being able to say to production, okay, we can go on location for this, like between Dreams of the Witch House and Pickman's model, for example, or we can reconfigure this set to become, you know, the drug den, for example, Colin, that we kind of burnt down that set and then we reused it. Like it was sort of the part of the, you know, part and parcel of the necessity of trying to shoot all these different realms.
People that were watching it, I don't think they're going to bump on any of that or go, wait a second, that I recognize that.
Those are the Easter eggs. You want them to notice.
Exactly.
That. They'll get it. Wait, that room's the same room as, I get it.
All in the same.
And am I mistaken, or did the old man's apartment also come from Nightmare Alley?
Yes, it was. For those of you who've seen Nightmare Alley, it was the burning country shack, which we burnt down. Like in the film, you see it burnt down, and for some reason, it ended up in the trailer. I don't know why. I think we were worried that we'd have to shoot it again because Guillermo always wanted to set that setup out in the parking lot and burn it further. And so we kept it at the end of the show, and we had it in a trailer. And I was like, "Oh, we still have that? Oh, let's pull it out because I need a crappy old apartment." And so we used it for the '70s apartment in your episode, and then we redid it for Mason's tenement apartment, and it worked beautifully. Like, you know, we threw it in the garbage after. I mean, 3 times. Using that 3 times was pretty good. Reduce, reuse, recycle. We try and do that a bit in the film industry.
Colin dropping the bomb on Tamara. That the episode is in black and white.
What?
Tamara, does that turn your world upside down in some way?
It was a big deal to go black and white, and we went through a similar thing on Nightmare Alley. Guillermo initially wanted to shoot it in black and white, and Dan Laushton, the DP who did that movie and works with Guillermo often, said, "No way." Like, and Guillermo also wanted to shoot it in the more square format, the more square aspect ratio. Laushton was like, "No, I don't want to do that. I want 1.8:5. We always do 1.8:5. Like, why are we suddenly doing 2:3 or whatever? You know, the old movie style." And so Dan and I both talked Guillermo off of the edge. And then when it was Vincenzo, the director, who wanted to do it black and white, when he went there with Guillermo was like, yes. So I'm really actually surprised because it was really something Guillermo wanted to do. And he did make a black and white Nightmare Alley in the end, which I haven't seen, but
I'm hoping it'll be available for people to see at some point. It won't be initially, I don't think, but maybe there'll be a magical option to watch it as an alternate version later on.
The Graveyard Rats in black and white.
Yeah, in black.
How was Vincenzo with it?
Well, I mean, he's a pro. He found a way to turn that into another magical thing, you know. And he's so great at creating and so fantastic visually. I mean, you know, again, he got to spend a bit more time doing colorizing things, so to speak, because I was on another job, but I would sort of come in at the beginning and check it out again, and we'd just sort of make little changes here and there. There are advantages to color. There are things you see in color that you don't see in black and white.
80% of my job is color. It was really hard to do. We had a really hard, and Lewis, our costume designer, Louis Akira, was really tough because it's like, well, a green fabric in black and white can look gray, and a yellow fabric can look, you know, feel like it looks brown. Like, they shift so much. So it'll be interesting to see it.
I was there for the color sessions, and with on my own and with Lily. So I sort of set a pass with Mark, the colorist, the same colorist that we did all the episodes with Colin as well. We set the look, and then Lily came on and did a remote session with us where she sat and watched through it. And we stuck true to the vision of she wanted it punchy. I remember the first time I met with her, she's like, I don't want any of this kind of like, muted, desaturated look that everyone's doing now. I want like punchy. And she was using Death Becomes Her as a reference.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted that kind of slightly punchy, like 80s, 90s kind of color palette lighting where she said, I want to see rosy cheeks. She kept saying, I want to see rosy cheeks. I want deep blacks. I don't want any of this, like the way people shoot stuff now. And we stuck to that. Like we really did. The colors are as we intended them. They're rich and strong. I mean, the stills you showed, that's kind of what it looks like, and even more so in some cases. And the blacks are deep, and yeah, so she went for it all the way. I mean, it pretty much is what we set up for.
Cool. I can't wait to see them.
How do you see a project through from beginning to end? What's the process like in terms of production designer and DP?
The sooner I can get a DP on with me in prep, and sometimes it's a real luxury to have that, the better for me, because I hate designing in a vacuum, and I really do try and design with lighting in mind, because it's my work that the DP has to show off and tell the story to, as well with the lighting. So I really try and incorporate lighting initially in all my design work. And if I don't have a DP there, I've been doing this long enough that I can make some pretty good guesses of like, okay, this will be the DP will like this, will be backlit. I get all of that, but it's really having that relationship from early prep is like it's a wish list thing. We often don't get it, but I feel like on this show we got it. Jeremy even came in, who I hadn't worked with before, came in before he really started, and we were able to talk, and we had some stuff, and we were able to make some really crucial creative decisions. And Colin, who I'm used to, like, we have a shorthand, and we had, he was accessible from the very get-go, really. We were lucky we had Shane as our set decorator working with practicals to give you guys as many options. Like that's a no-brainer. Just like how can we help you guys practically and make the set look good at the same time and get the right vibe and mood. But camera tests are really crucial, and I'm working on one movie right now where we haven't even finished the set, and we're doing camera tests because of the color of the walls are white, and of course we're not doing them actually white, but the DP is freaking out because we're replicating Graceland for this Sofia Coppola movie I'm doing, and it's like Graceland is white, we can't stray that far from what the reality is. Camera testing and putting colors and for costumes, putting fabrics in front of the lights that the DP knows they're going to provide is essential. We did that on Graveyard Rats a lot because it was such a dark movie. We really needed that camera test time, and we did some on Lot 36, right, Jeremy? We were able to do some camera tests,
yeah.
But I really look at that as a guide for me for picking final colors and textures and paint. Yeah, and personality. Like you gotta like your DP you're working with. It's a pretty, you guys are both pretty easy going. Like, I don't think I've worked with a tough DP. Some DPs can be really difficult and demanding, and I don't want to say disrespectful to the art department in the process, but a little bit dismissive. And to me, that's usually the DPs who haven't been doing it long enough or have been doing it too long and to not want to develop that relationship between designer and cinematographer. It's really crucial.
I think it's important that as DPs, like we have to recognize that there's a process of work that's going to happen, and that the sooner we get our input in, the better, because the machine starts to work and the sets start to get built. And if you come in and don't consider something soon enough or voice your opinion, and then it's like, oh, those windows are in the wrong place, and then now they've already built the flats where the windows are going to go, you want to try and get your 2 cents in as soon as possible because the machine has to start building. So it's that getting in early is key, because then you sort of set the pace for everything after that.
For you, Jeremy, I imagine The Expanse was similar. Like those sci-fi sets are the lighting is so integral to the set and the way it's going to look on camera. You have to have that design input from the cinematographer and the lighting department as you're designing the sets. Like there's just no two ways about it.
Yeah, 100%.
especially in those situations, like how reflective a set is in a given situation, where the light can come from, how the set could potentially self-light, and all those sort of things will help us forevermore when we're working in that environment. Getting in as early as possible is important. And I think we kind of snuck in a little bit, very early on. Tamara, we were talking about graveyard rats very, very early on, again, because you have these problems you have to solve just about physically filming something. And what's great about having that shorthand with you is that, we know, again, sort of how each other works. And you also have a great gift for understanding how light works in a set. And so it's an easy conversation to have. It's not always necessarily that easy. Jeremy, as you say, if you don't get in there early, quite often, the train will leave the station. Sometimes the train will leave the station intentionally because there doesn't want to be a discussion. And I think what's great about working with you, Tamara, is you want to have that talk, and you want to talk about, how things can work. And that only will save us later. We won't be fighting the intent of the set. Everything will be working in concert.
I've seen sets that have been designed where they've only done one way in and out of the set and no wild walls. And I'm like, and the production saying, this was on a show where I came in as the fixer, and I was like, the set looked gorgeous. It was a psychiatrist's office. I was like, what's wrong with this set? And they were like, every time we shoot here, it's so slow. And I was like, well, where's the wild wall? And where's the other door? Like, there was no way for the crew to operate in this set. So like, just fundamental things. I mean, I learned that early on, and I've been doing this so long that you can't think of, there's never enough wild walls, and they have to go fast, like put them on wheels to allow the crew, especially in something like the Witch House, Colin, that weird wacky set where remember we had to go into that very specifically and go like, where's this shot from? Because it was such a crazy angular set.
And it was raised a bit too. So, when you pulled a wall out, you then had a 4-foot drop to the floor or what have you. And so, figuring out, how would we platform out from there so that we would, be able to get a dolly back there or the base of a crane or whatnot, and figuring all that stuff out in advance, was fantastic. One of the things that your team does that's amazing is that you actually test the wild walls and time how long it takes to pull things and put them back in. And so before we enter a set working with you guys, you will literally say, okay, so that wall comes out in 4.5 minutes. It comes back in 7 because we have to do this, and having that kind of information, is fantastic. Quite often you'll run into a situation where you'll want to fly something for the first time and everyone goes, okay, how are we going to do this? And by the time that question's bounced around a bit, you go, okay, never mind. We don't have time. But with you guys, we always feel that, things are prepared enough that we can actually make use of those opportunities, and that's great.
Yeah,
and that's good information to have, that calculation of then knowing the time. You can kind of do the math and say, you know what, let's do that first and then we'll do this thing, because we know it's a combination of those. That's 10 minutes there, and you're not going to get into that situation of welding a wall and then there's that one screw that no one knows where it is that's stuck, and you're like with a pry bar trying to find, and it's often like that's that one screw that wasn't marked, that everyone's struggling to pull this wall out because there's one screw that no one knew was there.
It's our worst nightmare. We've all been living and learning, man. Wow. Yeah. But we got to build cool stuff, which is what I live for. We did, some of the ones that Jeremy and Colin didn't work on, like the viewing, we just built this crazy kind of round set that was like, I was designing it in a series of Zoom meetings with the director, and he would show me this thing, and his mother was an artist. He'd show me she did these faces he wanted to do. And I was just like, okay, we'll do this long haul. And then haul wasn't long enough. That was just a weird process, an interesting one. And Panos, the director, is a real character and kind of brilliant in a very strange but non-communicative way. He's, one of these people you want to just say, do we talk in visuals or do we talk in words? Because I felt like the words weren't necessarily working. But they were all very demanding, and really had their own sort of sense of style and taste. And so I really felt like I was having to zone, move around. And then Jeremy, you had to work with somebody who was a award-winning cinematographer. I don't know how, at your first get-go, I mean, that was challenging. It must have been challenging for you.
Maybe because of his background as a cinematographer. In some ways, I had to remind him of things that he would just say, "Oh, you and I, we know what we're doing. We don't need to block. The actors are going to be here." And I'm like, "I think we should do a blocking." But he often didn't want to because he was so confident that we knew what we were doing because we got the two DP minds. But he's like, "Yeah, we don't need to do a blocking." And then we start setting up the shot, and the actors come in, and now it's like the dolly's in the wrong place because the actors want to be over here. And I'm like, maybe we should block it because he was so confident that we knew what we were doing that I had to kind of say, we really should block this, I think. And we did. And even sometimes shooting the scenes when there wasn't dialogue, she would have her boombox playing specific songs. And I'd never worked with anyone who had done that before, where we literally have music playing all the time. And that was always the undertone of the scene was this song. So every time we shot that scene and all the coverage, she would play it either as we were about to roll or during the scene, and she would stop it before the dialogue would start. But we'd always have music playing. Between the wide angle lenses and the music playing, it was like this surreal place that we were living in that felt like a real weird place.
The not favorite moments were more to do with just dealing with the stuff that we can't control. I mean, we got completely obliterated by weather during Dreams in the Witch House, and it really affected what we could do with the end sequence of the show. And we ended up coming up with a different solution for it in the end, but it's frustrating to have all the pieces of the puzzle there and have prepared everything, and then you end up with winds so high that it doesn't matter how long you prepared, you just cannot use any of the tools, and the actors are going to freeze to death. We had greatness in our sights, and external forces prevented us. What was the most unique thing about each of these episodes? It was the director, in each one. It came at it from a completely different direction. Each one had a completely different upbringing, handled problems in a completely different way. And we all know that that's always the case, but it's interesting to have a project that's where you get to see that happen bi-weekly in a funny way. Like two of my 3 episodes that were quite long. I think we had like 24-25 day shooting schedules for 2 of them, and so they felt like mini features, so tightly together, developing 3 relationships and seeing that whole thing through was a good thing. I mean, it was an exciting thing.
We've all done our fair share of episodic television, so it was that in and of itself was like, oh my God, this person is like they're making their own films, and they're like, this is going to be their own film.
Yeah, because there wasn't really any kind of overarching style or thing they had to adhere to. There wasn't something that they didn't have to connect what they were doing to the next episode. So they were thinking completely of just what they wanted to do. There was none of that anyone from over top really telling us what to do, other than just schedule and how are you going to make it work in the time that we had. We didn't have any creative constraints. There wasn't really anything of like, well, is that the right beat for this story? It was like, no, it's like they had the kind of full control of the tone in that sense.
Mm-hmm. And Netflix, they were really, they didn't set any parameters. They weren't getting involved creatively, which was really nice. Like I kudos to them for just letting us do our thing and do what we do to the best of our ability without interfering.
A huge trust.
Yeah, just I mean, a lot of that comes from it being a Guillermo show, I think, and they trust him and they trust them, then trust his team and the directors he chose to make the story. So
Tamara, Colin, and Jeremy, thank you for your time, and I'm very much looking forward to watching this series.
You're gonna binge watch it, Francis.
Oh yeah.
And they're not all real horrors. Like, I hope people are going to be disappointed that they're not so horrific. Like, some of them are just kind of, The Murmuring, which you guys didn't do, is kind of a love story more than anything, and a story of motherhood. So there you go. Yeah. Okay, it's got a ghost in it, but
with a ghost.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you guys.
Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye.
All the best.
We'll see you soon.
Bye. Have a great
Goodbye.
weekend.